Jessica Morden.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it falls to me to respond on behalf of my party today as the Deputy Shadow Leader of the House. And although I can't promise to match the pizzazz of the Shadow Leader of the House, who was here earlier on, my honourable friend, the member for Bristol West, I do look forward to supporting her excellent work in holding the government to account every sitting Thursday in 2022, just as she's done every week, every Thursday on Thursdays at Business Questions this year. In fact, not just on Thursdays or at Christmas, but all year round. Although I do feel, and I have to say, my appearance at the dispatch box rather than in the Whip's office should give hope to late developers everywhere. And whilst the tone of these end-of-term debates is often more convivial than other exchanges that we have in this place, there is an air of sadness here tonight. And as someone like the Honourable Member for Wantage mentioned earlier, as someone who often takes part in the pre-adjournment debates, the loss of the late member for Southend West, as introduced by the Honourable Member for Harrow East, as he rightly said, is really keenly felt with us today, the loss of David Amess. He was an ever-present master of these debates. His speeches were always fair, they were always funny, they were always passionate, and he unashamedly championed his beloved Southend and his constituents. And these speeches were delivered with the customary grin and the glint in his eye that we will all remember him for. We very much missed a speech from him today, but his generosity and his kindness to colleagues and the contribution he made in this House is missed even more, and I know we'll all send love to his family and to his friends. And as he really showed us, these debates are a fantastic opportunity, like Business Questions, for honourable members to range a whole range of issues. As the Honourable Member for Wantage said earlier, you know, there are 50, 40, 50, 60 issues you could raise here. And let's face it, this year we've had plenty of material to work with. Today we've had some brilliant contributions from around the House on issues that are really close to members' hearts. On this side of the House, it was a real pleasure to hear the Honourable Member for Manchester Gorton, a wonderful member of the Shadow Leader of the House team, and my thanks to his staff for all the work that they've done. And he talked with such pride about the contribution of community groups and schools in his constituency, and I very much applaud his call to make the COVID Memorial Wall give it a long-term future, and I wish him luck with that campaign. Always great to hear my honourable friend, the member for Luton South, speak of the excellent work of her community group. She's a fantastic local champion, and I look forward to her achieving a debate on the contribution of charities in this House and the support they need, which would allow me to speak and thank the unsung heroes in Newport East, those charities and food banks doing so much great work, not least the issue that's been raised with me by the guides recently about access to banking services for particularly small charities. So I do hope she gets that. Well done also for the Honourable Member for Putney, who also spoke about her community groups and a range of different issues in her contribution. And well done on her campaign for banning plastic in wet wipes. No one disagrees, she's quite right, and it will be a parliamentary life worth spent on that issue alone. So we look forward to her success on that. And it was also very interesting to hear her experience on Bosnia, and her points on housing are well made. And I draw her attention and to the Honourable Member for Wantage, or to Ipswich, who spoke on this earlier, on the announcement by the Welsh Government today on some of housing and some of the cladding issues that we've heard. The Honourable Member for Luton North, a fellow Labour Whip's Office colleague, and we should thank our whips across the House, I think, and our advisers and our civil servants who support our Whip's Office. Anyway, the Honourable Member for Luton North, and Luton, I have to say, was very well represented today in this debate. She's quite right about looking to see the light and seeing the best in people who really stepped up and stepped forward during the most difficult of times. And I would just say to my honourable friend also, I very much recognised her description of those weeks trying to help people home from Afghanistan. And she was also quite right to raise the disproportionate impact on COVID of the disadvantage and the inequalities that that's exposed. I also, on the issue of Afghanistan, I very much agree with the Honourable Member for Harrow East on the need for the Afghan settlement scheme, resettlement scheme, and having worked with a number of Afghan interpreters over the years who settled in Newport East, who we spent many years trying to reunite with their families before this current crisis. I think it's really, really important we get that right. And the Honourable Member for Harrow East also mentioned the biometric residency permits issue. Now, for many of the families who did make it to rejoin previously settled Afghan interpreters in Newport, certainly, we've had families waiting in bridging hotels for many months now, waiting for those and I do hope that the Deputy Chief Whip listens to that. It's really very important. And I think all members would commend the Right Honourable Member for Sutton Coldfield for raising the really important issue of the compulsory helmets for those involved in snow sports. That was a really harrowing case, and I know we would all send our love to the family, and I think he does the House great service by raising it. And also extremely important to hear the Honourable Member for Beckenham and gallant Member for Beckenham speaking with such experience of the situation in Bosnia. He speaks with such expertise on defence issues generally. I know his comments were echoed by my honourable friend for Putney, and he is quite right that Britain has a role to play in that, and we must save Bosnia from another disastrous war. And I think many members today will reflect on his speech in the days to come, and I think it was a really important thing to raise. The Honourable Member, can I join the Honourable Member for Eastleigh in his comments about key workers and health workers, which gives me the opportunity to thank the staff at Aneurin Bevan Health Board and our GPs as part of the booster programme on all those key workers out there working with us at this time. And can I say to the Deputy Chief Whip, the Honourable Member for Eastleigh is a most assiduous, this is for his black book, is a most assiduous attender of the Joint Committee of Statutory Instruments, so I hope he makes note of that today. He also talks about rail, which gives me the opportunity to ask the Deputy Chief Whip if the government look kindly on the Mega Rail campaign, which is a campaign to have a walkway station in Mega, and it's an issue I've raised many times in this House, and perhaps the Deputy Chief Whip could put in a word for me. And last but not least, I think it's really important to hear the Honourable Member for Ipswich mention dyslexia, actually. I think that's a really important issue to raise in this House and would be welcomed by many of my constituents. And can I echo the Honourable Member for Glasgow South's quite rightly mentioning the issues of security and abuse, and I hope that the Deputy Chief Whip hears that and that we continue the pressure to get those things right. And as we close the curtain on 2021, colleagues around the House will be challenging the government to do better in 2022 across a range of policy areas, and one of the most basic things the government could do to help is to improve engagement with members on departmental answers and response time. And I know I speak for many members when I say we have departmental response time to constituency queries this year, which have been a real concern. It's often raised in points of order in this House. The Home Office, to take examples from my constituency, has been quite shocking at some stages, with about 8,500 unanswered queries from honourable members in the system. You know, and you have constituents also waiting over a year for cases with the child maintenance service to be resolved, and unacceptable wait times from HMRC and DVLA too. So let's hope for much better in 2022. As I said earlier, there's always plenty to raise with ministers on these occasions, not least in the last few days when we've seen a PM suffering the biggest rebellion of this Parliament. And as others have said, you know, it's been up to this side of the House to show the leadership that the Prime Minister can't. And, you know, as many people have said this week, we've seen some of the worst leadership at the worst possible time, and we need a serious PM for very serious times. And we can't let an absent Chancellor off the hook either, really, at a time when urgent clarification is needed on support for workers and businesses, and the threat of inflation on household bills looms large with a cost of living crisis heading into the new year. And it'll be a really, really difficult Christmas for many with a near decade high inflation, and you know, some of those families facing a really, really hard Christmas. You know, we can't pretend to businesses that nothing has changed. Businesses can't trade properly, and we can't abandon businesses and workers at this time. And it really feels like the government's in chaos, with the Prime Minister who's lost his grip, and that working people are paying the price for that. However, on a more cheery note, as the Honourable Member for Rutherglen put so well, the glue that keeps this House together is all the people that work in it for us. So may I end by thanking staff across both houses, the wonderful doorkeepers, the security staff, the police, the catering, the cleaning, the clerks, the library, Hansard, broadcasting, and the many, many roles for all they do for their tireless work to keep us safe and help us keep our jobs. And my personal thanks to my team, Kath, Dan, Elaine, Sarah and Emma, and to those staff of honourable members working in constituencies who are, and many honourable members have said this, on the very front line for us in very difficult times, and it will be a difficult year next year too. And if I may, Mr Deputy Speaker, thank one other team in this place whose work is often unseen but nonetheless is vital. Taking a liberty here as the Chair of the Joint Committee of Statutory Instruments, can I take the liberty of saying a very big thanks to Council, to the clerks, to the committee, which the Honourable Member for Eastleigh is a member of, for all the work they do to scrutinise secondary legislation, especially at this time with the emergency regulations. And may I suggest the committee's special report, which is called Rules of Law Themes from COVID-19 Regulations, to the Government Deputy Chief Whip for some interesting recess reading and pointers to where the Government could improve, whilst appreciating the hard job that civil servants have drafting legislation in quite difficult circumstances at the moment. So, Merry Christmas and a safe recess to everyone, all including you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and the whole Speaker's team. Nadolig Llawen Pawb.